Well, hello everyone. My name is Alexander Reeves, and I'm a final year PhD student at ETH Zurich. And today I wanted to tell you about some of the work that I've been doing during my PhD, which is all about multiprobe cosmology. I guess that's why I'm here. And I will just start with. Oh, doesn't work. Yeah, I'll just do it like this. Okay. I just start with a classic. Introduction picture, which is, as you all know, we've made this remarkable progress in cosmology over the last decades. We've pinned down the energy densities of our universe to very high precision. Despite this progress, I think there are two questions which are really pertinent to cosmology in 2026. These are, what is the nature of dark energy? Is this really a cosmological constant? And what is the neutrino mass, and how can we constrain this from cosmology? And I've been trying to answer these questions using a multiprobe approach. There's also a linked question, which is, could these two questions be linked together? And as I mentioned in my PhD, I've been using multiprobes to try and address these. Okay, so let's get straight into it. This is kind of a busy plot, but this is an overview of the pipeline that we built. So I'll just walk you through it quickly. On the right-hand side is the simulation processing part of the pipeline. So we start from dark matter only n-body simulations, and we produce this publicly available package called uFalcon, which takes dark matter only simulations and forms correlated mock realizations of all of the different probes that we want to combine. And right now that is CMB lensing, galaxy clustering, galaxy weak lensing, and ISW. And from 2,000 of those simulation realizations, we form our covariance matrix. This includes all of the cross-covariance terms and all of the higher order trispectrum contributions, which are sometimes hard to model analytically. On the left-hand side, we have the theory code part of the pipeline. So we start from traditional Boltzmann solvers, and we train emulators and JAX to learn how to map the input parameters to each of the different spectra that we want to combine. And actually, all of the inference part of the pipeline is written in JAX. This is really nice because it means it's all differentiable, and you can also run your inference on a GPU, which makes it much faster than traditional methods. Finally, in the middle, there's the data processing part of the pipeline. So we start with overlapping data on the sky. We extract a data vector. These three pieces are put through an optional compression part of the pipeline. Then we define our likelihood and perform inference to get cosmological constraints. Okay, and over a series of analyses, we built and validated this pipeline on mock data. And in the last year, we've been applying it to subsets of cosmological data. I want to talk about the most recent applications to data. So this came out late last year. And this was a combination of legacy survey galaxy clustering from DESI. So this has been introduced a few times throughout this conference. This is an imaging data set which covers a very wide area on the sky, as you can see in the upper right. And the redshift distributions have been calibrated with actual DESI spectra, so they're very nicely calibrated. And we look at the cross-correlation of that with some CMB lensing from ACT and some ISW from Planck. And then at the likelihood level, we add some CMB primary data from ACT-DR6 and the latest BO data from DESI. Okay, and we measure all of the auto and cross correlations of that combination. So we have 5 different types of two-point functions that we measure. We have some galaxy clustering auto correlations, the cross correlation with CMB lensing, some ISW cross correlations, and a CMB lensing auto correlation. And we put that all together into one likelihood. The first thing we do is look in ΛCDM. We do various checks of systematics, goodness of fit. But also in ΛCDM, I think there's a few interesting things to say. So firstly, the S8 that we measure from this combination of data is highly consistent with what you get from the primary CMB. So we don't see any S8 tension from the CMB lensing cross galaxy clustering. Another kind of interesting thing that you might notice is that we have a kind of weak constraint on H0. The reason that's interesting is because we're using projected galaxy clustering and projected CMB lensing. We wash out all of the sound horizon information present in those probes. And so this H0 constraint is completely sound horizon independent. This is interesting because there's a whole class of models that aim to resolve the Hubble tension by lowering the sound horizon. So if you still find a low H0 from this kind of measurement, you can potentially rule out a whole class of these kind of early dark energy models, for example. I know there's been a lot of work in this direction in DESI, and Gerrit's been doing some very nice work and complementary work using the full shape of the galaxy power spectrum. Right now, the constraint is not strong enough to actually make any conclusive statements, but this is expected to get significantly better with stage 4 data. Of course, you can also look in constraints beyond lambda CDM, and I mentioned at the start that the two questions I was interested in were neutrino masses and dark energy, so I put them here in this plot. On the right-hand side is our neutrino mass constraint, and what this animation is showing is compared to a CMB plus BEO baseline, what constraints you get when you add the multiprobe large-scale structural data. And we get a 32% tighter upper limit, and we're starting to really rule out the normal and inverted hierarchy with some quite high significance. On the other side, you might be interested in working out what this multiprobe data can tell us about dark energy. And this is kind of a busy plot, but let's just focus on this first panel to start with. So this is the dV over RD versus omega m plane. And I think this is a very interesting plane to look at when you're trying to understand the preference for dynamical dark energy from DESI CMB plus BAO. You can see the CMB constraints in black and the BAO constraints in blue. And one of the ways to understand the preference for dynamical dark energy is by understanding this as a model, which allows you to bring these two together, so resolve this discrepancy slightly. In green, I show the constraints where we actually also combine with our multiprobe large-scale structure data. And what you can see is that we condense the contour around the values preferred by the BAO. So this actually heightens this discrepancy in this plane, and in turn is going to heighten the preference for any extension that can resolve these two. And that's indeed what we see when we look at dynamical dark energy. We find a 3.3 sigma preference for this over lambda CDM, which is slightly higher than the CMB plus BAO baseline. We also compared this with early dark energy, so another way of changing the dark energy story is by having modifications at early times. And we also find that this can partially give you this same reconciliation. Again, both of these are hints. They're not any kind of detections. We need better data to make any definitive constraints, but it's interesting to see that multiprobe data can help you with this story. And I'll just mention that there was a paper by Desi from Edmond that also explored this early dark energy idea. Okay, the final thing I will talk about is the combination of those two ideas. So looking at neutrino mass constraints, but also extended dark energy models. So here again is the constraint in lambda CDM for the neutrino mass, with our full combination of CMB, BAO, and multiprobe large-scale structure data. And we can make the same measurement in extended dark energy models and see what happens. So firstly, in early dark energy, the story is not much changed. So the posterior still peaks at 0, and it's slightly broader, but there's not a particular degeneracy mechanism that's allowing us to raise the neutrino mass here. This is actually not the case for dynamical dark energy, where there is a degeneracy between the impact of dynamical dark energy on the evolution of the universe at late times and the neutrino mass. I'm showing this degeneracy here in this W0 WA plane. This is a posterior from our paper, and it's been colored by the neutrino mass. And what you can see is as you move away from lambda CDM, you can have a higher and higher neutrino mass while still maintaining a good fit to the data. So this is the degeneracy which is leading to this posterior. And indeed, we find that it's peaked above 0 and slightly more compatible with oscillation data. Of course, again, constraints here are very weak, so it's very hard to make any kind of definitive statements. But I think it's nevertheless interesting to look in these extended scenarios. Okay, so I will conclude here. And as I mentioned, these neutrino mass constraints, they're really limited by this dark energy degeneracy. I think there's some clear ways that we can try to improve this. So we can look at small-scale clustering. I'm shamelessly plugging a code base that we wrote last year to do EFT of LSS, galaxy clustering. You could look at higher order statistics, which also can help to break this degeneracy, or also high redshift information. So if you go to high enough redshift, you'll see all of the effects of dark energy, but you won't see, you won't see the effects of dark energy, but you will see the effects of neutrino masses, so you can potentially break this degeneracy. Finally, what's next for me? So one of the things that I found when I was looking, doing my PhD and looking at all these different models, was that there's a really vast model space that we can explore. I think it would be nice to have a model-independent kind of way of understanding discrepancies. And this is something that I'm working on right now. So if you're interested in these kind of model-independent reconstruction approaches, I'd be very happy to talk. Here is some preliminary work on mock data. So this is a combination of our multiprobe data plus CMB with a Gaussian process to reconstruct H of Z. And the shaded blue line is the 1 sigma error bar, and the red line is the best fit from DESI W0 WA. And you can see that with this kind of combination of data, we would be able to very clearly detect such a feature as this. So I think this will be an interesting thing for stage 4, but also with current data, you can already make some interesting constraints. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. You have time for a few questions.
Thank you. Could you please go back to the busy slide you showed at the beginning? I like that
right
one very much.
Yeah.
So about the covariance matrix, so if I understood it correctly, you get that from the MOX, which is great because that gives you the non-Gaussian contributions, as you said. But I was wondering about the very large scale modes. So are you correcting these covariances for super sample covariance contributions?
Yeah, very good question. So there's actually two effects. There's also the impact of the box size that you use for the simulations, which can also mess up your large-scale covariance. Yeah, we actually just make scale cuts to try to make our analysis robust to this. And I should say that we it was very painful, but one of the things I did a lot of was checking this covariance matrix against analytic calculations and making sure that we were robust.
Sebastian and... Oh, sorry.
You mentioned this emulator here that's written in JAX. Could you say a little bit more about this, particularly what the inputs and outputs are, what you're training on, but most especially what the structure of the emulator is and why you trust it to not be hallucinating or giving you any spurious results?
Yeah, very, very good question. So actually the emulator is really simple. It's just an MLP, so, the most basic architecture you could imagine. And the inputs are cosmological parameters and a few nuisance parameters, depending on which probe I'm trying to make the prediction for. Why do I trust it, and why do I think this is a reasonable thing to use? So I think you can actually test these things really, really carefully. Like you make some training data in a hyperparameter space using a Latin hypercube, for example, and you train your emulator on 80% of that data, you test it on 10%. If that 10% is actually a faithful representative sample of your parameter space, then you can very clearly show how big the errors are compared to the error bars of your data. In this case, we try to show that at 99% confidence level, it's less than 0.1 sigma of our error bars for each of our data sets. And so there you can see that you're not going to be biased by using this kind of model.
Hi, I was interested in your non-parametric reconstruction thinking.
Yes.
It's in prep. Could you go there quickly?
Sure.
So I'm wondering a little bit, in a sense that you're gonna, the expansion rate, of course, impacts distances from redshift 0 going up. But how will you do this with growth? You have to integrate growth the other way around. So I'm a little bit. There must be something really interesting there, or it's impossible to do. I don't know, one of the two.
Yeah, growth and expansion rate is a really interesting thing. People have looked at a few different ways to do this. So firstly, you can use the growth information to inform your H of Z, because there's a link between the two in linear perturbation theory. So this is a nice approach. The other thing, but the problem is there you have to assume GR. You have to assume GR in some aspects of dark matter. If you want to be completely model independent and also test GR, then you could also look at reconstructing D of Z as well at the same time as H of Z, but probably there your constraints are going to be very, very broad. So in this case, I use the equation to link H of Z and D of Z together, so it's all consistently modeled.
Okay, I guess I'll ask my question. So among the multiple probes, do you draw a uniform scale cap for all of them, or do you kind of try and decide Like, what's the decision making for the scale cuts?
Yeah, great question. It's not uniform, so it is probe dependent. So for example, for galaxy clustering, I'm using a really simple linear bias model. So there you have to cut a very low L, essentially. Whereas for CMB lensing, for example, I take the scale cuts from the fiducial act analysis. And then in cross correlations, I always take the more conservative of the two probes that go into the cross correlation.
Just a quick question on my side. So here you are slightly increasing the expansion rate at low redshift. So I guess the growth rate is decreasing, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is mock lambda CDM data, so really I should be recovering one. I don't know why the mock data.
But there is still a trend for increasing the expansion rate.
Yeah, I think it's work in prep, so
Sure.
yeah, this might change.
Any other question?
Quick.
Yeah.
How informative is ISW? Because it looked from the error bars like you don't really detect it.
Yeah, really good question. Not very informative at all. In fact, I did the test where I removed this, and the constraints don't really change. I was just interested in looking at it partly because it's informative for certain interesting dark energy models. And at the start of this project, I was thinking about some of those. So I have it in the pipeline, and I might use it in the future. But for these measurements, actually not very informative at all.
Okay. We thank Alexander again.